We've come to part 4 of our series on the religion of Islam. It's hard to believe that this lesson is necessary. Certainly when I was growing up in this congregation, it wouldn't have been even thought of as being a series of lessons necessary. But times have changed. And it is very important that we understand this world religion. Has over 1 billion adherents, and in many, many different countries that we have talked about. Next week, next Sunday evening, Lord willing, we're going to start our comparison between the Bible and the Qur'an and look at the differences in teachings on a variety of subjects. Tonight's lesson, as I mentioned this morning, is coming from a brother in Christ who has spent time in Islamic countries. His name is Ernest Clevenger. Wrote a publication or wrote some material called The History, Religion, and Conflict of Islam. He's traveled in several Arab countries like Lebanon, Egypt, Turkey, as well as others. And he references in his material, and this will be put online so you can look at all the references, and I won't give them all, but from a number of different sources himself, as well as what he has viewed personally. And so this is kind of very different than most lessons I have, because a lot of it's going to be read, as the past, or as has been in the past, these Arabic words that are translated into English, I will do my best in pronouncing them. I'm sure most of them will not be anywhere near correct, but I'm just kind of pronouncing them phonetically, which sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. So we hear on TV a lot about the Islamic State, and that phrase is used a great deal on TV and in magazines, talking about the Islamic State. Well, Islamic states are very, very different than what we would consider a national state. In Islamic countries, they have a system that basically directs their politics, their economy, their society, and their religious life. And all of that is combined. All 4 of those areas are combined into one. This system intentionally, without apology, discriminates between different types of people based on their religious affiliation. So, you know, in our Constitution and in our founding papers and the founding fathers, that was one of the things that was not supposed to be done, was discriminate based on religion. Well, in Islamic states, that is part of the Islamic State, is to discriminate based on religious affiliation. And that is something that they advocate as being good. This is not something they consider bad. They consider it good to make those discriminations. There are 3 differences that one scholar notes between an Islamic state and what we would consider a secular state. Number 1, an Islamic state is ideological. People who reside in it are divided into 2 groups. Muslims, in other words, those who believe in Islam, and those who do not. And those are the 2 main groups. You are either a Muslim or you are a non-Muslim. There are not in-between states, so to speak. Secondly, responsibility of the administration rests upon those who believe in Islam. In other words, in Islamic states, no one is allowed to make rules or to govern in any way that doesn't fully believe in Islam's teaching. Non-Muslims cannot be asked to undertake or be trusted with any type of responsibility to make decisions. And thirdly, an Islamic state is bound to discriminate between Muslims and non-Muslims. That is a foundational belief in all Islamic states. So whenever the news talks about Islamic states, regardless of countries or areas or whatever, that is a foundational belief of that religion, is that there will be discrimination against non-Muslims, because those are the only two groups, Muslims and non-Muslims. Now, what Islam does is it takes non-Muslims, that great big group, and then divides them into subgroups. And you may have heard some of these subgroups talked about on TV or radio or so forth. Two broad categories of non-Muslims. There are the Dar al-Harb, which is the household of war. These are people that are not bound by treaty or covenant, or whose blood and property are not protected by Islamic law. The other main group of non-Muslims are the Dar as-Salam. This is the household of peace. These are divided themselves into three groups. And these are the ones we're going to spend most of the time on the rest of the evening. These are all non-Muslims. The first group are the Simmis. These are non-Muslim subjects who live in Muslim countries and agree to pay tribute, basically, in exchange for protection. But they are not Muslim. The second category, the Hudna. These people have signed a peace treaty with Muslims after being defeated in war. So these were areas that Islamic forces came in, and there were battles, wars. They took over these people, and these people signed a peace treaty with them. We really won't be discussing them tonight. And the last one, these are people who basically travel to Islamic countries to learn about Islam. And they're kind of in a special category all by themselves. But that's what they do. They travel to an Islamic country to learn about the religion of Islam. Zimmis, or I don't really again know how exactly these are pronounced. These are pagans as far as Islam is concerned. They are basically Jews or Christians. You know, any Jew or Christian is considered to be a pagan because they don't follow Islam. So someone who doesn't follow Islam is put into that group category of being a pagan. They're considered infidels, are considered enemies. And in the Qur'an and in Surah 9, and I'm just going to reference, remember these are kind of like chapters in the Qur'an, the surahs are. This is Surah 9. It says, "Then fight and slay the pagans wherever you find them, and seize them, beleaguer them, and lie in wait for them in every stratagem of war." In another one, "O ye who believe, take not the Jews or the Christians for your friends and protectors. They are but friends and protectors to each other, and he among you who turns to them is of them." So basically giving a curse to anybody who turns to Jews or Christians for protection or for help or anything like that. The most extreme of the Islamic followers believe that the Quran commands them to fight Jews and Christians. "Fight against those who believe not in Allah, nor in the last day, nor forbid that which has been forbidden by Allah and His messengers, and those who acknowledge not the religion of truth." Which, whenever they use the religion of truth, they're talking about Islam. So in Islamic controlled states, non-Muslims are not regarded as citizens. They're not regarded as citizens. Muslims believe that this one category, these Zimmis, are polytheist. Poly, of course, meaning more than one, and theist meaning God. So to Muslims, and this is a very important part of the Islamic religion, Muslims believe that Christians believe in more than one God. The reason they believe that is because we believe in the Trinity. God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. And so to Muslims, that means we believe in three gods. And so that's why Muslims consider Christians polytheists. And of course that makes us infidels. That makes us pagans, because that puts us in the same category as anybody who would believe in nature gods and animal gods and anything else, because we believe, they say, in 3 different gods. Whereas to them, Islam believes in only one God, and therefore it is the real religion. There are a number of things that these Zimmis, this group of non-Muslims, are allowed to do and not do. They're not allowed to build new churches, temples, or synagogues. So you cannot go into any type of Islamic country and build a new, Christian building or a Jewish synagogue or anything like that. If one already exists, they can be renovated or kept up, basically. They can be added on to. And these churches are ones that existed prior to Islamic conquest. So if it wasn't there before Islam took over that country, if it wasn't there before, you can't build one or do anything to one after. So it's only if there was one there before Islam took over that country. That's part of their rules. Construction of any church, temple, or synagogue in the Arab Peninsula, which is Saudi Arabia, is completely prohibited. It's because it's the land of Muhammad. And Muslims are permitted to demolish all non-Muslims' houses of worship in any land that they conquer. So if Muslims went in and took over some part of a country, then the Islamic law allows them to destroy any non-Muslim religious building. It gives them that permission. These non-Muslims are not allowed to pray or read their sacred books out loud at home or in churches, lest Muslims hear their prayers. So for Muslims, it's not even allowed for them to hear a Christian pray or read the Bible aloud. They're not even allowed to do that. The non-Muslims are not allowed to print their religious books or sell them in public places and markets. They can sell them to each other, but not in the market. They're not allowed to install the cross on their houses or churches, since it's considered to be a symbol of infidelity. So to Muslim believers, the cross is a symbol of paganism. It's a symbol of infidelity, which is an important point because of some of the things happening in our country with crosses being put on buildings. They're not permitted to broadcast or display their ceremonial religious rituals on radio or television or use the media. They're not allowed to congregate in the streets during their festivals. They're not allowed to join the army unless there is an indispensable need for them. And then they can. There are categories between what Muslims can do and zimmis, these non-Muslims, can do. A Muslim is not allowed to emulate the zimmis in their dress or behavior. So Muslims are not supposed to dress or behave like non-Muslims. A Muslim is not allowed to attend the non-Muslim festivals or support them in any way. They are not allowed to lease their house or sell their land for the construction of a church, a temple, a liquor store, or anything that may benefit the non-Muslim's faith. They're not allowed to work for them in any job that might promote their faith, such as constructing a church. A Muslim cannot make any endowment or give any money to churches or temples. Muslims cannot carry any vessel that contains wine. They cannot work in any sort of wine production, nor can they transport pigs. And Muslims are not allowed to address zimmis, these non-Muslims, with any title such as my master or my lord. It goes against Islamic teachings to do that. They are They can financially assist non-Muslims provided the money is not used in violation of Islamic law, like buying wine or buying pork or something like that. They are allowed to eat food prepared by non-Muslims. They can console a non-Muslim in an illness or in the loss of a loved one. They are permitted to escort a funeral to the cemetery for non-Muslims, but the Muslim has to walk in front of the coffin and not behind it. And he must depart before the non-Muslim is put in the ground, before he's buried. That's not allowed. They can congratulate non-Muslims for a wedding, a birth of a child, and so forth, but they cannot utter any word which may suggest approval of the non-Muslim's faith, like may Allah exalt you, or may Allah honor you, or whatever. So they can't do anything that would in any way seem to promote or I guess promote's the best word, a non-Muslim faith. Women in Islam, of course, is a major issue throughout the world. And we see that in so many Islamic countries. And there are very special rules for women in Islam. And as you can see from the news, some Islamic countries are much stricter on these rules than others are. And so each country has the same rules, but they're not enforced to the same degree as other countries are. And so it's up to those people in those countries to decide how they'll be enforced. There's three main rules for women's dress. Number one, this is from Surah 7. We have provided you with garments to cover your bodies as well as for luxury, but the best garment is the garment of righteousness. That's from Surah 7. Second, they shall not reveal any parts of their bodies except that which is necessary. They shall not strike their feet when they walk in order to shake and reveal certain details of their bodies. Surah 24. And third, O Prophet, tell your wives, your daughters, and the wives of believers that they shall lengthen their garments. Thus then will be recognized and avoid being insulted. Surah 33. Now, from these verses, the Islamic scholars have determined that women should in public wear only long dresses, have a hair covering, and for the extreme countries, have a veil or face covering. So not all Islamic states enforce the veil or face covering. Also, women in Islam. Men are superior to women. This comes from Surah 2. And it is for the women to act as they, the husbands, act by them in all fairness. But the men are a step above them. Surah 4. Men have authority over women because Allah has made the one superior to the other. And then Surah 2. Men are superior to women because women have less intelligence, are less religious, they lack gratitude, and are less reliable as witnesses. It takes two women to equal one man in matters of testimony. We're talking about legal matters. Islam, as we see, is very male-dominated. Muhammad said, the woman is a toy. Whoever takes her, let him care for her, or do not lose her. The belief that a woman is a toy is of vital importance for the spiritual well-being of a Muslim man. This is from Surah 7. In the company of women, looking at them and playing with them, the soul is refreshed, the heart is rested, and the man is strengthened to the worship of God. This is why God said that he might rest in her. The husband's desires are to be met at once. This is from Surah 4. Obedience to a husband is the key to paradise for a wife. So if a wife wants to be in paradise to them, then obedience to her husband is the main way to realize that. And he can beat her for any disobedience. A husband's rights are considered divine. He is her paradise or hell. If Allah were not the only one to be worshipped, then the wife would be required to worship her husband. And that gives you an idea of women in Islam and what is required of them and what is thought about them. And again, depending on which Islamic state, We're talking about those vary somewhat, just like the veil covering. Some are more religious, a little more extreme than others. I remember it was probably about the last year we were in Jonesboro when one of my former students, Denise might remember, his name was Afif Siddiqui, and he was getting married, and he brought his bride over, and we saw her. And I still remember that to this day. Him and the ones that he was with and in my classes, I guess, would be considered a little more liberal Muslim than some of the others. But I still remember that to this day. So Islam has a lot of teachings, ideologies, practices, rituals that are very, very different to our culture, our Western society. Obviously, people that have to travel in Islamic countries have to be very, very careful about all of these issues. But it's very important for us to know what this world religion teaches, considering the vast number of people, especially in the United States, that are either converting to Islam or consider Islam to be just one of several religions, which is just fine. But considering the number of people who adhere to that, then it's very, very important that we know what it actually teaches. And just like tonight when I referred to all the surahs, those chapters in the Qur'an, that's where we need to go. And we need to know what the Qur'an actually says, not what the news may say or what certain shows may say about what Islam actually teaches. The best way is always to go back to the source of their beliefs, which is the Qur'an. And just from tonight's few principles and things that we've looked at, it's very apparent that Islam is incompatible with the Bible, especially in the view of women. One of the things the Bible did, especially the New Testament in the first century, is it changed people's thinking about women. Because women were second-class citizens in the first century. Very much so in that society, that Greco-Roman society in the first century. Women were very much second-class citizens. But the Bible has elevated women. Wherever it's been taught, wherever it's been practiced, the Bible has elevated women to a higher status than they've had in most any culture. And I think that's something we need to understand and talk with people about. It's very important that we know this. God has given us His Word. He knows exactly what we need. He knows men and women. He knows what we need. He knows what people need. And when He sent His Son to die on the cross, He knew exactly that was the only remedy for man's problems, man's sins. So tonight, as we're led in this invitation song, I encourage you to think about your relationship with Jehovah. And if there's a need that we can meet, then I encourage you to come as we stand and sing this song.